All right. Hello and welcome to the NSF X-Labs webinar. We're going to be introducing the NSF X-Labs opportunity here. It was previously introduced, by the way, as the NSF Tech Labs initiative in an RFI last December. We're also going to be specifically discussing the scientific instrumentation for sensing and imaging X-Labs topic that was announced as part of the first batch of X-Labs, along with the quantum topic, quantum systems, interconnects, and integrated photonics. Hello, my name is Becca Schmiel. I'm an Associate Program Director within the NSF Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships, or TIP. And I'd like to thank you for being interested in this very exciting new initiative at NSF TIP. So here's today's webinar agenda. We're going to start with opening remarks from the NSF Assistant Director for TIP, and then go into an overview of the NSF X-Labs opportunity, then highlight the scientific instrumentation for sensing and imaging topic, and then we'll end with a live Q&A panel. The webinar will run approximately 75 minutes. We previously said 60, but we're anticipating it will go a little bit long to continue to address as many questions as possible. We do recommend you wait until after the presentation to submit your questions through the Q&A button, as they might be answered during the webinar. So next, please welcome Erwin Gianchandani, the NSF Assistant Director for TIP, who has championed the NSF X-Labs initiative as a pioneering new funding mechanism to support the really high-risk emerging technologies and advance the U.S. science, technology, and different partnerships research. So we'll turn to him first to help us set the stage for this new initiative.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Becca, and good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you might be located. As Becca said, my name is Erwin Gianchandani, and I have the pleasure and the honor of serving as the NSF Assistant Director for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships, or TIP, as we call it for short. And so effectively, that means that I help lead the TIP Directorate and the team here driving the X-Labs effort today. I wanted to take just a couple of minutes at the outset to express our excitement on behalf of all of my colleagues at NSF and across the USG in being able to bring to you the X-Labs initiative and to be able to have this conversation today with all of you about our goals and objectives with this program. Just a little bit of context about the TIP Directorate to start, and then I want to highlight a few of the strategic objectives about X-Labs, and then I want to say a couple of thank yous, and then I will hand things back over to Becca to drive the webinar from there on forward. So first of all, many of you know, I think, the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Unit or Directorate here at NSF. We stood this up a number of years ago with the specific set of goals of trying to be able to accelerate science and technology to impact to the market and beyond, of trying to be able to grow a workforce, grow America's talent in high-skilled areas to be able to ensure that we have a competition-ready workforce for the 21st century. And to be able to do everything that I just described around accelerating science and tech to the market, growing that workforce in every corner of the country, because we know that there's talent and technology in every part of the United States. A key motivator for establishing the TIP Directorate a few years ago when we did was the acknowledgement of competition on a global stage. Competition is probably more fierce today than it has been in decades, if not ever, when it comes to investments in science and technology and being able to further the science and technology enterprise as a vehicle to further economic competitiveness and national security. And so as we think about that, it means not just investing in new science and technology directions, but it also means in terms of also thinking about investing in new ways of pursuing that science and technology too. And so it is explicitly aligned with that particular virtue that we are really interested in the notion of X-Labs because it offers us effectively a new tool in the toolbox when it comes to being able to further science and technology for this country and for the world going forward. Becca and the rest of the team will take some time to walk you through a little bit of the program design, the design choices, and some of the details of our implementation, much of which has been informed by the RFI that we put out back in December, and we're really appreciative of the robust response that we received from many of you in the community. But at the same time, I want to take just a moment to reinforce a set of the key strategic objectives that underlie the X-Labs initiative. So we're looking through this program to be able to do a few things. First, to really be able to accelerate research to practical use. And ultimately to be able to ensure that it has impact in the real world for a range of real world applications and benefits, including potentially supporting back the scientific and technological and engineering enterprise of our country as well. We want to be sure that we're betting on teams, not just projects, funding full-time dedicated teams with the autonomy to be able to pursue ambitious goals rather than perhaps focusing in on a very specific and term limited project over a short period of time. We want to be building sector-defining platforms, new science, new technology that can serve as the foundation for future innovation and can serve as the foundation for economic growth across a range of different sectors going forward. We want to think about the outcomes of this initiative that go beyond papers and publications and conference proceedings. Again, coming back to that motivation of really thinking about the practical use cases and the impacts and the real world applications of the investments that we're making and the research and the outputs through these investments through the X-Labs program. We want to think about ways in which we can foster cross-sector collaboration as well. How do we encourage meaningful partnerships with industry, with philanthropy, with academia, with other stakeholders to ensure that the approaches that we're taking, the research that we're undertaking, ultimately all aligns with that first order principle of trying to be able to realize impact for the real world and for the nation's security and competitiveness going forward. And so I think the important thing that I want to emphasize, there's going to be a lot of talk on this webinar and going forward about the notion of independence, independent research organizations free of some of the bureaucratic challenges that we might face, really focusing in on autonomy, really focusing in on milestone-driven research, really focusing in on a runway to be able to help undergird that research over many years so that we're not constantly in the business of writing proposals and so forth. I think the one thing that I want to emphasize about this is that we are very interested in trying to be able to support new types of team structures compared to traditional OPDs. We're getting a lot of questions already in the inbox about how we think about team structure relative to X-Labs. And so I just want to emphasize that this initiative, X-Labs, is really about trying to be experimental in nature. We want to consider this as a grand experiment in terms of that new tool in a toolbox that we want to pursue. And so in that context, we're really looking to see what's your creativity when it comes to forming new teams, how we can pull those new teams together, and how we can ensure that it's not just simply a small business or a lab group that slots into the program, but really we're looking for teams to become independent X-Labs that can drive some of these sector-defining platform technologies, some of these robust new innovations, accelerating progress. All of the key strategic goals of the program that I described can really drive that over the course of the next 3 to 5 to 7 years as they move forward. The last thing that I want to say is I think that it's really important to recognize that not every problem is X-Labs shaped. And indeed, it's the case that NSF continues to fund science and engineering through lots of different mechanisms, and we encourage you to leverage the mechanism that makes sense for the scientific progress that you're looking to be able to make. This is a new tool in the toolkit with a very specific set of goals, a very specific set of strategic drivers that are embodied in it. And so you will see from Becca and the rest of the team some topic areas that we've predefined for this first round of X-Labs. There may be more to come down the road as well in the not too distant future. These are illustrative of what we think of as X-Labs shaped problems or challenges. And I think that we want to acknowledge that there are moments in time where X-Labs make sense and there are teams for which that makes sense. And then there are other mechanisms, historic ones and potentially new ones as well, that we have to conceive of going forward that might make sense for other areas of science and engineering and other sorts of team formations as we go forward as well. Finally, let me stress that if you are part of another federal agency, if you're affiliated with a philanthropic entity, if you are potentially a capital partner who's really excited about the X-Labs concept as you hear about it and dig into it, and you're looking to potentially explore what it means to partner with us, I'd encourage you to please let us know that. Reach out to xlabs@nsf.gov. We would very much welcome hearing from you, and we would very much welcome the opportunity to understand more of what that partnership might embody, what that might look like going forward. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Becca, but before I do, I just want to take a moment to emphasize all of the names that you see on this particular slide. Many of these folks are on this webinar. Some of them will come on camera and speak to portions of the slides or help answer the questions that you all are raising in the Q&A. But I just want to acknowledge the team that has worked incredibly hard and on an incredibly fast pace going back over the course of the last year or so since we first began envisioning this concept, and really over the course of the last 6 months or so since the RFI came out. They have worked tirelessly to get us to this point. And while some of us can get up here and say some words at the outset, ultimately it is this team that has the vision and the commitment to pursue the directions that we're hoping to go with the X-Labs effort. So my immense credit to them and my immense gratitude to them for all of their work. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Becca to take us away with the rest of the webinar.
Thank you, Erwin. All right, before we proceed, I want to highlight the documents available on sam.gov for your reference. So we're going to be reviewing information from these documents throughout the webinar. The first document is the Other Transaction Agreement Solutions Offering, or OTASO, which is essentially the overall master solicitation for the X-Labs program. The second is the topic announcement for the scientific instrumentation for sensing and imaging. The OTASO is going to contain details about the overall NSF X-Labs opportunity, and the topic announcement provides information about the timeline and specific scope of the sensing and imaging topic. Both of these documents are hosted on sam.gov, where NSF posts contract solicitations. They're not going to be available through research.gov, which is where NSF posts kind of standard financial award instruments. We're going to discuss the differences between contracts and other financial awards later in this webinar. So next, I'm going to provide a brief overall summary of the X-Lab initiative to set the stage. Our objective is to offer the structure, resources, and flexibility needed to develop truly innovative platform technologies that accelerate breakthroughs and unlock new economic sectors. The X-Lab initiative features several key elements, specifically independent research and development teams with the ability to adapt quickly to evolving technologies. Each of the teams should have operational autonomy, including flexible use of subawards and independent hiring and use of funds. Teams are going to be awarded other transaction contracts with NSF with milestone-based funding, and teams are expected to enable cross-sector collaboration for high impact. So the programmatic structure of X-Labs includes a phase 0 planning period lasting 9 months, followed by a 2 to 3 year phase 1, and then a 2 to 3 year phase 2. We anticipate that teams will receive between $500,000 and $1.5 million for phase 0. And for phase 1 and phase 2, we expect teams to be awarded between $10 to $50 million per year per team to support their R&D efforts. So next, we're going to go over the high-level strategic objectives that NSF hopes to accomplish with the X-Lab initiative. To present this section, we'll turn to Bridget Taraga, our strategic advisor for partnerships and TIP.
Thanks so much, Becca. For 75 years, NSF has funded scientific discovery in this country largely through one model, and it's largely worked, and the US has been a global leader. But times have changed, as Erwin demonstrated at the beginning. Global competition in science and technology is fierce, and research challenges have evolved, become more complicated, requiring interdisciplinary expertise to make those real breakthroughs. To sustain US leadership in critical science and technology fields, we need new tools to complement the standard research grant. We need creative mechanisms, flexible funding mechanisms. And the National Science Foundation's Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate is here to drive that change and to do so quickly. We are rigorously testing new ways to accelerate discovery and create opportunities for US talent and the US research and development community to launch breakthrough platforms that can shape the next generation of science and technology. And so there's a few strategic objectives which we'd like to cover. The first is about building sector-defining platforms. X-Labs is not about siloed science. It's not about niche products, but instead about novel platform technologies, ones that can serve as the foundation for future innovation, unlock entirely new sectors, including new fields of scientific inquiry. When we think about platform technologies, think about building blocks or the base upon which engineers and scientists across the country could develop processes, applications, additional scientific questions or technology. The internet is a quintessential platform technology. It underlies infrastructure. It supports countless applications and services in virtually every sector. The molecular biology technique, PCR, is another platform technology. You can think of PCR as biology's photocopier. Before PCR, obtaining DNA to do enough DNA to do experiments was slow and labor intensive. But now that the fundamental problem of DNA amplification has been solved, PCR has become the underlying engine for applications ranging from ag tech, forensic science, as well as infectious disease diagnostics, like PCR-based COVID tests. We also think about technologies like very large-scale integration, VLSI, that have enabled the transition from having room-sized mainframe computers to personal computers and the cell phones that we use regularly today, because they were able to create integrated circuits by combining millions or billions of transistors into a single silicon microchip. Next slide, please. In addition, we're thinking about new organizational structures for research and development. This is about fostering independent R&D organizations that have the structure, the resources, the flexibility necessary to tackle large-scale scientific advancements. It's our hypothesis that the U.S. innovation ecosystem has the ambitious experts. It has the talent, folks with bold vision for the future, folks who are ready for the sustained resources and flexibility necessary to cultivate these early stage platform technologies. But the problem is that the current setting, whether it's academic settings or industry settings, they sometimes fail to incentivize R&D for emerging high-risk technologies, the kinds that could represent the paradigm shifts that we're looking for. So X-Labs is an opportunity for you to create new research structures that will complement the traditional academic or industry labs where the bulk of R&D will remain, but to do so specifically for large-scale scientific breakthroughs. Don't think about contorting your existing structure to something that kind of fits X-Labs. Instead, consider embracing the novelty of this opportunity and creating a fit-for-purpose X-Lab with full-time interdisciplinary experts, because it's our hypothesis that independent teams of full-time interdisciplinary experts, if they're operating with the flexibility, autonomy, and significant resources that they need, that this will cultivate breakthrough technologies faster.
All right, thank you so much, Bridget. So next we're going to go over the programmatic structure of the NSF X-Labs and their topics. So first I'm going to put some definitions for X-Labs up. First, topics refer to the specific subject areas announced by NSF. They're chosen because they've been identified to be areas where breakthroughs have the potential to create or reshape entire scientific fields and technology sectors, especially in areas critical to U.S. competitiveness. So for this initiative, NSF has announced the topics of scientific instrumentation for sensing and imaging, as well as the quantum systems, interconnects, and integrated photonics. Missions, on the other hand, are proposed by the teams themselves. So each mission should address key challenges, gaps, or bottlenecks within a given topic, and propose a specific platform technology to be developed. Missions should focus on areas where the proposing team is uniquely qualified to advance the state of the art and address opportunities that are currently unmet by existing funding. The desired outcomes for NSF X-Lab teams are centered on achieving significant research and development breakthroughs. We do expect teams to develop technologies that address specific technology challenges and ultimately result in innovations that create or transform what we consider possible in science and technology. We are also looking for early stage prototypes of these platform technologies, prototypes that typically would not be incentivized by private funding or traditional academic funding mechanisms. So we've provided a few examples of outcomes that fall outside the scope of X-Labs. These include advancements of multiple research arms of a technology without a clear mission. This is something typically seen in like a research center. incremental improvements, the state-of-the-art development of technologies that already have substantial private investment, particularly from the tech industry, and creation of test beds, data center infrastructure, data hubs where storing or managing data is the primary focus of the proposal, and then missions where the challenges are solely technical, such as commercialization or other business-related issues. Those are better suited. All of these are better suited for other funding mechanisms, including a few that we have within TIP. It's really important to note that TIP offers a variety of funding opportunities. So some of these areas are not within the scope of X-Labs, but they may be eligible for other programs with TIP. I want to go over the programmatic structure once again, specifically regarding funding. Teams will be selected for phase 0 after the initial review process. They will then enter a 9-month planning phase 0, during the proposal stage. During the proposal stage, the teams should request the amount of funding needed for phase 0 up to a maximum of 1.5 million. It's important to note, not all of the teams are expected to require the full 1.5 million for 9 months. Please do propose the amount your team reasonably needs to support the 9-month period. Complementary support from industry or philanthropic partners or other forms of cost sharing is encouraged, especially for phase 1 and 2, but it's not required, particularly for phase 0. So now we'll go over the funding mechanism, which is an OT contract with milestone-based funding. To present this section, we'll turn to Patrick Breen, the Senior Procurement Executive and Deputy Office Head of NSF's Office to the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Becca. So let's talk about other transaction contracts. So other transactions authority is NSF's newest obligation authority. We did get this authority through the CHIPS and Science Act in 2022. And when asked what an OT really is, they're really defined more as what they are not. They are not grants, cooperative agreements, or FAR-based contracts. They're also not subject to many of the restrictions or regulations implementing those more traditional award types. We go into significant detail on nsf.gov, where we have posted our other transactions guide for folks who really want to delve into how we look at them philosophically. But in general, an other transaction contract is a flexible funding mechanism. It's available only to programs that have a nexus with the TIP Directorate and allows us to tailor terms, payment schedules, and really how we build a relationship with awardees specific to the programs they're looking to support. So as we've heard, we are looking at milestone-based contract payments here, but depending on the program needs, other transaction contracts can have any payment type you've seen under grants or contracts in any other mechanism. We talk about relational contracting, and other transactions are really well suited for that relational contracting model. This allows us to essentially co-create those award instruments. When we negotiate another transaction as opposed to when we do other types of instruments, it's really where we want to work with awardees or potential awardees to determine how those agreements ultimately look, function, and how we administer them as a team. Under an OT, a lot of that time burden shifted to negotiating that final agreement as opposed to upfront with proposal preparation. So it really does allow us to gain a common understanding of how a potential awardee would work with NSF, what our expectations are, what your expectations may be of us, and really allows us to put in place long-term goals in a long-term relationship to really get to those win-win solutions and to achieve success. But let's talk quickly about what those other potential instrument types are and sort of where the other transaction differs. So many folks are familiar with financial assistance, your grants and cooperative agreements and contracts. The use cases for those instrument types are defined by the Federal Grants and Cooperative Agreements Act of 1977. And they're fairly structured. The underlying regulations are also well structured. And it really provides a limited set of applicability. For example, under financial assistance, it has to be for a purely public purpose. The government has very limited involvement in terms of a grant or substantial involvement in terms of cooperative agreement. And under a FAR-based contract, those are typically used to acquire goods and services that directly support government operations. We do have an entire section of the Federal Acquisition Regulation dedicated to research and development contracts, and a contract can be used for any purpose, both public or directly for the benefit of the government. Other transactions, however, are outside of that framework altogether, and they are very unique. Now, other folks have other transactions authority. I know a lot of folks have seen that authority with the Department of War or with our friends at the Department of Energy. Ours is slightly different than theirs. Everyone has their own set of implementing guidance for their particular other transactions authority. And the way we've created ours here is to really, again, allow for win-win partnerships so that when we put these together, it is a true long-term relationship that we're working hand in glove to achieve success for the program. So if we want to then talk about this particular other transaction, the process we'll be looking at between now and potential awards, we are currently, we have the TASO publishing the topic announcement, as Becca has pointed out. So that is on sam.gov. That's where we publish all of our OT announcements. We will then have you all who are, any interested parties submit a written proposal. NSF evaluators will then take those written proposals, complete the evaluation as described in the OTASO and supporting documents, and then we will invite a subset of teams back for an oral presentation. So when we do that, you will get something in writing from one of our agreements officers with the request to participate, with the instructions for what you have to put together in that oral proposal package, as well as how we're going to do that, typically virtually, and then the date and time. Once that presentation is provided to NSF, the evaluation team will conduct their final evaluation and make recommendations for awards to the acquisition office. At that point, my staff will reach out to the individuals who have been selected to move forward for awards and begin negotiation on terms and conditions. Now, this again is where I mentioned that the bulk of our time will be spent. While broadly all of our other transactions are fairly consistent, this authority allows us to negotiate specifically on items, terms, or conditions where we might need to have a little bit of a differentiation between either awardees or between different programmatic needs. So once we finish out that negotiation process, we'll then move on to execute the award, and then we start to administer this award, and that's where we have that continuing and ongoing engagement with NSF, working with you all to ensure success for the program. Becca?
Thank you, Patrick. So next we're going to review the X-Lab team structures. I'll say this is a topic we've received many questions about, so I want to spend some time clarifying what an X-Lab team is, how much flexibility exists in designing one. There is no single X-Lab team structure, but there are some traditional structures that will not be supported by this initiative. With X-Labs, NSF aims to support non-traditional independent teams, specifically full-time teams operating outside the structure of traditional academic and industry R&D labs. I really want to clarify the term team refers specifically to a group of personnel working together towards one research goal. It's not a team of partnered entities or organizations. We hope that those teams engage with partners and other entities and industry partners, but the team is the group of personnel. These teams are expected to function autonomously as independent entities by the beginning of phase 1. Teams must demonstrate a clear mission, strong leadership, and an innovative approach to the technologies and breakthroughs they plan to pursue. Every X-Lab team will have a lead organization. For some of these teams, especially small self-supporting teams, the lead organization may be the X-Lab team itself, or the lead organization could be a host or temporary host of the X-Lab team. There will only be one lead organization per X-Lab team, which will sign the OT contract with NSF. The lead organization may choose to subcontract with other partnering organizations. For example, an X-Lab might subcontract during phase 0 to fund their personnel who are currently staffed at different organizations. They might also subcontract to new organizations during phase 1 to support their research mission. It's really important to note that the X-Labs initiative does not intend to fund consortia. We're not looking for teams composed of primarily many different subcontractors under a single lead organization or teams of existing collaborative lab groups. Our focus is really on tight, dedicated, independent teams that are organized in order to conduct innovative R&D work with urgency and purpose as one entity, but with flexibility to make subcontracts as needed to support their mission. This is something of a point of confusion, I think. In phase 1, we really expect the core team to be composed mostly of full-time staff within one dedicated and independent team. And again, not a loose team of collaborators. There's no requirement to apply with a complete team or a finalized organizational structure before phase 0. Phase 0 is really designed to help build the team and establish a workable governance structure if one does not already exist. So the eligible X-Lab teams have to meet the requirements of an autonomy factor test to ensure they are sufficiently independent, especially from a host or lead organization. The teams must demonstrate that their leadership structure enables decisions to be made quickly, efficiently, and independently from any other organization. Again, particularly from a host organization. And teams must also have full internal control over funding allocation, research directions, partnership agreements, intellectual property produced by the X-Lab. This includes licensing agreements, hiring, salary negotiations, and contracting. The X-Lab team and its leadership structure are expected to be appropriately independent from any host or lead organization if they are not themselves the lead organization. And NSF's goal here is really to establish these independent research teams as nimble and impactful within the research ecosystem. Senior key personnel are not PIs, I want to say. We're calling them senior key personnel, are individuals who contribute in a substantive, meaningful way to the development and execution of the X-Lab. All senior key personnel whose qualifications will be used as part of the selection criteria for the teams must be full-time by phase 1. Teams may still hire part-time employees, especially as vendors, as advisors, subcontractors, research labs, etc. Those individuals would not be senior key personnel. During phase 0, there's some flexibility to support teams through a subcontract while they're still forming. We don't expect senior key personnel to leave an employer or to take a leave of absence from a faculty position, for example, until the beginning of a phase 1. And until they know if their team is going to be selected for that phase 1. Senior key personnel can only be listed on one proposal per topic announcement, and they can't be citizens of certain countries or appear on lists of foreign entities of concern. You can read more about the specific research security requirements in the OTASO. So here we've provided several example X-Lab structures in the table below, and I encourage you to review these examples in detail at your convenience. We'll make this recording and the slides available. I would like to highlight a few distinct structures that we anticipate could be possible. In one scenario, the lead organization is the X-Lab team itself. These teams do not have a host institution or a larger entity as they're already fully independent. In another case, the lead organization hosts the X-Lab team throughout all of the phases. There's also an option where the lead organization temporarily hosts the X-Lab team during phase 0 as it is spinning out of the host organization, and then the X-Lab team becomes an independent entity by the end of phase 0. Please note that this list is not comprehensive. We strongly encourage teams to think creatively and outside the box when considering how to structure their X-Lab. Please consider new and innovative approaches to team organization and governance to really develop effective, workable research structures that are not currently supported. To clarify, teams are not required to submit their proposals through a host organization. They may directly apply as an independent team. Before signing an OT contract, you have to establish a legal entity such as an LLC. Also, before submitting a proposal, you'll have to sign up through sam.gov with a unique entity identifier. These independent teams should be 100% dedicated to the specific R&D mission they are proposing, and they might reorient or pivot their entire operational model to become an NSF X-Lab. These are the independent teams, that first row. This might be best accomplished by a newly formed team of independent researchers specifically forming due to the X-Lab announcement. It might also be a team that's still trying to establish themselves as a startup or as a nonprofit that chooses to pivot to an X-Lab structure, or they're an existing focused research organization or independent research organization that isn't already contracted within some kind of host organization or some kind of host nonprofit. It's going to be difficult to qualify as an independent X-Lab team as a small business or an existing VC-funded startup. A small business typically can't simply continue its usual operation and simultaneously act as an independent X-Lab team. Any business would need to host an X-Lab team that operates with significant autonomy from the parent organization. And X-Lab teams have to be really distinct and separated from their existing governance and fiduciary structures of, for example, a company or a small business or a university. So I just want to let you know that NSF is really not interested in proposals that follow traditional models of lab groups or small businesses, or other groups that aren't really interested in forming an autonomous, driven, independent team. We would encourage those traditional teams to be supported through SBIR, if you're a small business, or other NSF programs, and proposals that don't describe a team that would meet the autonomy requirements by phase 1 will be pretty quickly rejected at the written proposal stage. I'll also add that as of yesterday, TIP has announced a request for information for a new Tech Accelerator initiative. The Tech Accelerator announced their own topics, including one for SciTech, which supports scientific instrumentation. This announcement is brand new. It was just released on sam.gov yesterday. If your team is really excited to participate in the sensing and imaging topic, but doesn't intend to be structured like an independent, non-traditional X-Lab team, I really highly encourage you to take a look at the Tech Accelerators RFI. Compared to X-Labs, that program is particularly focused on commercialization, entrepreneurship, and translation to market. They're hosting a Tech Accelerator webinar on June 5th, if you're interested in learning more. Okay, next we're going to go over the milestones and milestone payments that teams will develop and propose for each phase of the initiative. The milestones are distinct, predefined performance checkpoints within an OT contract that teams must meet before payments are released. Teams are required to document their progress to NSF through deliverables, and payments are only made after progress is demonstrated. This approach differs from financial assistance awards and grants at NSF, where the payment is issued before progress is shown. By using milestone-based payments, we really ensure that X-Labs is outcomes-driven, not just activity-driven, and we want the teams to demonstrate both technical and programmatic progress towards their mission. Each milestone should have really measurable exit criteria, so it's clear to all when the milestone is achieved. The teams are going to propose their milestones for each phase, specifying their milestone tasks, deliverables, and payment amounts. And then the milestone plans and payment schedules will be negotiated with NSF before the OT contract is signed for phase 0, or before the OT contract is amended for phases 1 and 2. Milestone plans will be developed prior to the start of each phase. The milestones for phase 0 will be proposed and negotiated during the proposal phase. The milestones for phase 1 will be proposed and negotiated towards the end of phase 0. And the milestones for phase 2, again, will be proposed and negotiated towards the end of phase 1. The phase 0 milestones are going to be proposed by teams that are invited to submit an oral proposal package. You do not need to propose milestones or milestone plan during the written proposal stage. We do recommend proposers wait to be invited to submit an oral proposal package before you spend time preparing your milestone plan. During phase 0, the teams are going to produce the planning documents required for the phase 1 proposal. The table on the right here illustrates the general format of the milestone and deliverables table, including some specific milestones required for phase 0. You can see the IP management plan, the data management plan. Teams will have the opportunity to specify due dates and the payment amounts for their milestones. And then teams are going to receive additional guidance during phase 0 to help develop appropriate milestones for phase 1. So next, we're going to talk very briefly about the phase 0 review and selection process. X-Labs will use a 2-step evaluation process that is designed to reduce the burden of completing a full proposal on the proposers and the burden of reviewing full proposals on NSF reviewers. First, the teams are going to be asked to submit a concise written proposal limited to 8 pages that describes their mission, their tech landscape, any desired outcomes, their team qualifications, and their overall team capabilities. The purpose of this written proposal is to clearly convey the team's key idea, its significance and ambition, and to highlight its importance for innovation in the United States. NSF will then invite a select number of teams to provide an oral proposal and submit an oral proposal package, which is essentially the full proposal. At this stage, teams will provide their budget, their milestone plan, senior key personnel disclosures, and other required documents. And then invited teams will present virtually to NSF. We've gotten a few questions about how many teams are going to be invited to submit an oral proposal. NSF is going to leave this open to ensure that all promising ideas have the opportunity to be considered. So there's no predetermined limit on the number of teams invited. I'm sorry that is not very satisfying to everyone, but we do want to keep it open, and we are excited about the different ideas that can come in. So now we're going to move on from the general overview of X-Labs and discuss the specific topic of scientific instrumentation for sensing and imaging. Briefly revisiting this slide, the topic is scientific instrumentation for sensing and imaging. It was announced because it's been identified as a priority for scientific US competitiveness. We're seeking specific missions proposed by the teams in sensing and imaging that address critical challenges for which the proposing team is uniquely qualified to address. These missions, again, they should be unmet by existing funding structures, meaning they would not otherwise be funded in the current landscape. So I'm going to give some background on the selection of this topic. So every new era of discovery requires a new era of measurement. This is evident in the development of microscopes, which enabled the visualization of cells and microorganisms, photon detectors that allowed scientists to explore atoms and subatomic phenomena. And even more recently, quantum sensing innovations with nitrogen vacancy centers, which allow researchers to image nanoscale magnetic fields and many other phenomena to invent new quantum materials. Currently, scientific instrumentation is hitting up against some practical limits. Advancing our ability to explore the frontiers of science is going to depend on breakthroughs that usher in new eras of measurement. These may include recent innovations in quantum sensing, also in super resolution imaging of biological tissues and biomolecules, in adaptive AI sensing and imaging algorithms deeply integrated into sensor operation, or even in sensing across time scales or space scales. Our objective in releasing this topic is to unlock new scientific fields through new modalities of measurement, and to enable visualization and characterization across fields. So in biology, chemistry, material science, many other disciplines, we're hoping to create foundational tools that will catalyze new discoveries and potential new technology industries in general. There's actually many topics that are going to fall within the scope of this topic. We're looking for foundational platform technologies in sensing and imaging and supporting areas. It's going to be quite broad. So importantly, we're looking for systems that are not currently commercializable and require early stage investment. We're also explicitly seeking new sensing technologies in physics, biology, material science, chemistry, many other disciplines, as well as science or technologies that could transcend different scientific fields. So when considering your team's idea and whether it fits within scope, I really encourage you to ask yourself, does my proposed technology expand the frontier of scientific instrumentation beyond incremental improvements? Does it accelerate breakthrough research? Does it have the potential to create or reshape new lines of research? If the answer to these questions is yes, your idea is likely in scope of this topic. So here is the timeline for the sensing and imaging topic. On June 3rd, we're going to host another webinar for the topic focused on a Q&A panel. So we will not present these slides. We will focus and dedicate a lot of time to answering your specific questions. The written proposals are going to be due on July 13th. Oral presentations will take place sometime the week of August 17th. And we anticipate that the teams will finish negotiations with NSF by October and begin their phase 0 by November. After a 9-month phase 0, the phase 1 would start around August 2027. That would be around when we expect all of the senior key personnel to be full-time if they are on the selected phase 1. And then the go, no-go selection process is going to begin 2 months prior to the beginning of phase 1. That's when NSF is going to evaluate the phase 0 progress to determine which teams are going to transition to phase 1. All right, thank you very much. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the team that made this possible. We have program directors who are experts in sensing and instrumentation. We have contracting professionals leading the charge with the other transaction awards, and a group of extremely talented strategic advisors and others within TIP that are pushing this initiative forward. These are some of the people working behind the scenes to make it all happen. And with that, I'd like to invite everyone to join our Q&A session. Please welcome back our moderator, Bridget Taraga, and our Q&A panelists, Joda Tungnapnua and Patrick Breen. They will help me answer your questions during the remaining time in this webinar. To participate, please click the Q&A button and submit your questions. You'll have to type it out. If your question is not addressed live today, we will continue to answer questions behind the scenes. Please feel free to message us at the X-Lab email address. And I recognize, by the way, that the second Q&A webinar is quite close to the final due date of the proposals. So we are going to be really deeply staffing that inbox and making sure that your questions are met later, if not answered today.
And thanks so much for the questions that have already been put in the Q&A. We're going to address them kind of in sections, so we're going to group them together. I anticipate we're going to get to all or most of them today. We're going to start with talking about the scope and the technology topics, and then we'll move on to the OT contract and the budget. So Joda, Becca, and team, can you speak a little bit more about the section of the solicitation that gives examples of what is not considered in scope? It says it does not include computational or software solutions without practical integration into an instrumentation system. We have a question related to this about whether a center focused on hardware and software technology that can be used by a wide range of sensing and imaging platforms, whether that would be in scope.
It's a good question. I want to explicitly call out that the traditional type of research centers are not considered within scope. So we're not looking for research centers that fund a broad range of different applications, because we're looking for an X-Lab team to have a really dedicated mission that is clear and defined and that they can drive to with a lot of purpose. So that being said, the point specifically about software implementations that are not implemented into a workable system or a workable real life system. If there was a topic that integrated software with hardware, I think that satisfies that condition, and that would be within scope. In particular, some of the AI examples that we call out, the different ways that we could design tools and platforms to integrate really cutting edge AI into the sensor interpretation in order to further what we can do with sensing and imaging, I think is really interesting. And so there are a lot of ways in which we can build software into these systems.
There are a couple of questions regarding other topics, not the sensing and imaging topic. Is there or has there been an opportunity to suggest X-Lab topics? And there's also a question, will it be months or years before additional X-Lab topics are announced?
We hope, and I'm hoping I'm allowed to say this, but we do hope that we will have more topics before the end of the calendar year FY26. Sorry, the calendar year 26. Unfortunately, I'd love to tell everyone what those topics might be so that they can prepare. I realize it takes a long time to prepare to form an X-Lab, but we're going to have to make sure that we release them kind of all together as is. We are planning more topics to be released this year, hopefully. As far as suggesting new X-Labs, that was exactly what the RFI in December 25 was able to do. And a lot of these topics that we've announced come directly from the RFI, from community participation in the RFI. And we hope to release further RFIs to look for more ideas for X-Labs.
There are a few topics or questions. Does X-Lab seem like the right fit for me? Some of them are not widely applicable, but I have one that I'd like to share. It says, I have a technology I have published on during my PhD that I started to commercialize. Right now it requires a bit more R&D and I need more people, which means more money. It's too early for venture capital and SBIR doesn't seem like the right fit because it is a very different approach. Is X-Labs right for me?
I mean, that sounds pretty ideal for what we're looking for. We're looking for things that are getting caught in between emerging technology from the lab and actually being taken up by venture capital and industry. And so for all of these questions of, is this in scope? Is that in scope? I really want to come back to some of these questions on this slide. Are you significantly, not incrementally, but significantly advancing the state of the art? And is this going to form new lines of scientific inquiry? Is this going to form entirely new sectors of the tech industry? Something like PCR is a really good example that we've been using. It enabled polymerase chain reaction, enabled not just the entire whole fields of biology, but also entire whole sectors of the biotech industry.
I'd like to turn to some questions for Patrick Breen. Patrick, what can we expect from the negotiation period of the OT contract?
Right.
And can
So, a big part of that is just making sure we're in agreement on terms and conditions. We finalize milestones and milestone payments, any sort of specific KPIs for that particular transaction need to be negotiated. The bulk of this will be done in advance, right? So we do have a set of standard terms and conditions we begin with. Many of them are in the OTASO. All of them, or most of them rather, are currently in the NSF Other Arrangements and Other Transactions Guide that is published on nsf.gov. So you can see those. It really comes down to is there something specifically unique that we need to address in order to ensure that we can move forward with that particular award? So it's not really, it is a different process than people are used to. If you're more used to grants or contracts, we just give you the list and that's the list and you agree to the agreement or not. In this case, we have a little bit more leeway. It does not take significantly more time. We have found specifically here at NSF that we're able to make these awards very quickly. It does require active participation by all parties. And that's the one key thing you should expect, is that it will be a significant amount of involvement between NSF, my staff, program staff in the TIP directorate, and the potential awardee, to make sure that we can get those through and cleared, because we all come in with our different perspectives. So that's really the one key difference, is a lot of discussions, a lot of involvement, a lot of back and forth on draft documentation.
And Patrick, are federal requirements fully applied to OT contracts, specifically anything from CHIPS and Science Act?
So the CHIPS and Science Act does apply, 100%. That's where authority comes from. A number of other federal laws also apply. I think this is something where folks don't have they're just not as commonly used, so folks don't always have a firm grasp on some of these things. There are laws that will apply. So things like the Paperwork Reduction Act applies. Things like the Privacy Act could apply. Procurement Integrity Act does apply in some cases. There are a number of existing statutes that do. There are some statutes that don't. And that's where our draft set of terms and conditions that's published will really help folks better understand that particular landscape. But yeah, existing federal statutes do apply to the extent that they broadly apply to contract actions.
Patrick, does the pay after milestones have been reached also apply to phase one?
And I'll defer to Becca a little bit on that. I believe the way we've structured this is that we do have to get to a specific place where we will agree that a milestone has been met before we will release the payment.
We didn't go into some of the milestone structures for phase one here, just because I wanted to keep this tight. But we will have some opportunity for reporting milestones, as well as like the big progress milestones, to allow teams to have some amount of funding coming in pretty regularly, in addition to kind of the big ticket funding milestones. And so we can use the progress milestones to ensure that the team has a proof of concept for where they're going, to allow them to scale. So essentially, we can make sure that the teams can get some money during a kickoff meeting or after quarterly reports, so that there's steady money coming in. But also, once there is demonstrated progress, the team can really take off and scale with the significant funding from the progress milestones. So we'll go over that more, especially during phase 0, to make sure that the milestones are set up correctly for phase 1, because it's going to be really key to get those milestones right in order to drive a lot of progress.
But to clarify for folks, there will be some amount of seed funding provided at the beginning of phase 1. Folks will not have to have demonstrated technical progress, without having received funding. There will be a period of time in which we would expect work to be done, and then there will be milestones where we sort of have a go, no-go decision after that.
Yeah, the seed funding, I believe, is supported through, a phase 1 kickoff meeting, a phase 0 kickoff meeting.
I have a question for Joda. Joda, is there an expectation for cost sharing? Is there an expectation for philanthropic cost sharing, for example, or does it make applications more competitive if they have more matching funds?
Yeah, so while it's certainly interesting if teams are able to provide philanthropic cost sharing, it is not required, and it is not going to be a condition of moving forward from phase 0. So we want to make sure that you understand that the NSF phase 0, 1, and 2 funding levels are designed to provide the necessary support to hit those milestones. Now, we recognize that additional leverage resources may expand what's possible, but that is not going to be a precondition of phase 0 progress.
I would also want teams to consider if they are bringing in a ton of partners, especially cost-sharing partners in the beginning, are they staying nimble? Are they staying independent? And we want to balance a team's independence with the amount of cost share they bring in. It might be best to bring in a lot of partners and cost share later in the program compared to phase 0.
There are a number of questions in the chat that are about eligibility and team setup. Let me read a few of them and then have you sort of answer them as a group. Can academic institutions or commercial entities be the prime organization for X-Lab proposals? If not, in what form can academic or industry researchers participate? Is it correct to say that the PI can be a university professor during phase 0, but cannot during phases 1 or 2? And are lead organizations able to subcontract to universities?
These are all very good questions. I'll start with the first one. Yes, the lead organization, the host organization may be a business, it may be a university. As long as they are able to commit and agree to the autonomy requirements that we lay out in the ATASO. And I think that's going to be something that will need to be really considered by these institutions, and we'll need to continue to work on through phase 0. The last question, I think, was also an easy answer. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, are lead organizations able to subcontract to universities?
Oh, yes, they can subcontract to universities. We've really built X-Labs to be a program where lead organizations, or rather the X-Lab team themselves, have a lot of freedom and independence and autonomy, in some cases from NSF, to be able to make a lot of contracts quite freely, so subcontracts quite freely in order to support the research that they need to support. And that might be subcontracting out a lab group at a university if they're the best ones to do the work.
Yeah, and I want to tackle a couple of things. I think there's been a number of questions in the chat. Like when, if I'm an academic faculty member, when do I need to stop being an academic faculty member to pursue this? A couple of things. I think the requirements for senior key personnel are different than the kinds of staff that might be, or contracted personnel that might participate in an X-Lab that aren't senior key personnel. But for senior key personnel, after phase 0 is when we expect a full-time dedicated effort. Now, I do think that it is possible, and we have said over the course of this webinar and other previous webinars, the way that we have designed this is quite flexible, and we've described the sort of what for what we're looking for, which is that we have a thesis around independent research organizations having the flexibility and autonomy to go and pursue breakthrough R&D without having to be constrained by maybe some of the limitations that might come with traditional institutions. Now, what we did not say is how to do that, and we expect that universities may come up with creative solutions to things like IP ownership, or how their faculty members can dedicate 100% of their time to this project during the funded period. And again, those are going to be important considerations for us to evaluate when you submit your proposals. So I think that I think what's important for folks to understand here is that we are not giving you sort of the solution or constraints that sort of show one kind of model, but rather we're saying to you, if you have an idea for how you could hit this factor test that's outlined in the solicitation, while still being a part of a parent institution, or by starting something totally new, or by having investment capital, having already received investment capital, demonstrate to us, show us that the team will be able to, from the governance and fiduciary perspective, be able to drive towards their research milestones without being distracted by other things, without having to be constrained by other institutions' hiring practices, or and to have a governance model that really encourages them to sort of run through walls to accomplish those milestones. And if you can demonstrate that, then I think that's great and X-Lab shaped. it also may not be the right fit for every single kind of research approach or research problem or team. And it is a significant, you know, it likely represents a significant career shift for the folks who are participating in it. And that's okay. That folks, not everybody is going to want to pursue that. But I think it's also why phase 1 and 2 come with substantial funding runways that allow really ambitious projects to sort of be pursued at that 10 to 50 million per year mark.
You've talked about parent institutions, and there's a question here about sort of parent institutions or host organizations. If X-Lab teams are independent of the host organization, how do you define that host organization or parent institution? How are they serving as a host?
I think it has to do with the entity that signs the OT contract. So is the team its own independent entity within a larger organization, and you are using the unique entity identifier of the larger institution to propose, and you're using the, for example, indirect cost structure of the host institution, and the contract with NSF is signed directly with the host institution. So that would be when the host organization is acting as a host for the team. And the team then is defined as the group of dedicated personnel led by the senior key personnel who have a appropriate amount of independence.
Yeah, and that, again, it could look like a number of different things, but you could imagine it sort of on a range from like a fiscal sponsorship to an organization that then gets spun out into a separate legal entity, but then shares other institutional governance structures that link it back to another institution. There's a whole range of opportunities that we encourage folks to explore and figure out what makes sense for their projects.
Okay, so we can keep moving quickly. I'm going to, again, group a bunch of questions together, and then maybe Joda and Becca can split them out and answer them. Are grad students able to participate in X-Labs? Can senior or key personnel serve as a co-PI on multiple X-Lab teams within the same category as long as they're not the lead PI? And then finally, is teaming allowed or even required if an entity already possesses all capabilities internally? Is there any tool to identify potential industry collaborators for academic PIs?
I will start with, are grad students allowed to be involved to the extent that they are able to be involved with the structure that is set up? If there is a host organization, for example, that is set up that is directly funding the grad student to be involved explicitly with the X-Lab, yes, of course. I mean, we're leaving a lot of flexibility for teams to propose, teams and leagues organizations to figure out what works for them, and that might be, grad students or postdocs.
Can senior or key personnel serve on more than one proposal in this topic if they're co-PIs?
No. PIs are not the term that we're using in X-Lab at all. The senior key personnel are expected to be dedicated 100% to the team. They are not expected to be funded or to be able to apply to be proposed, to be on a proposal with more than one X-Lab written proposal. So one senior key personnel can only propose to one X-Lab.
And is teaming allowed, and is there any platform for teaming?
Yeah, I want to highlight once again that this, compared to some of the other programs we have within TIP, X-Labs, one of our strategic goals for a lot of the teams in the future is to make sure that they are appropriately partnering and collaborating with a lot of different institutions. That might be national labs, that might be industries, that might be universities, but this is not a teaming program. The team that we want the X-Labs to form is the team of dedicated independent personnel. We're not looking for a bunch of partners to come together bunch of separate entities to come together and form kind of a joint X-Lab that is not that is also not a dedicated full-time team. And so different independent teams can form, different teaming partnership models might make a lot of sense. And I would, justify that in the team capabilities section of the written proposal. But we're not supporting a consortia style teaming workshop, for example, like some other programs in TIP might.
Let's turn to talk about intellectual property. Who owns the IP? Will NSF retain or request any rights to IP? And what should be in the IP management plan that's developed in phase 0?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. We are really excited to support IP structures that support broad adoption. We're interested in different structures and for teams to put in their IP management plans during phase 0, different ways that a technology cannot be stalled due to the IP structure, IP licensing structure. This might mean really broad or non-exclusive licenses. This might mean different open kind of licenses. It might, in some cases, a team might argue that a exclusive license is the right way to go, and I think it'll depend on the topic area, especially. But we are expecting the team to almost entirely own their IP, especially the IP produced by the X-Lab team during the period of performance. And I want to turn it perhaps to Patrick to answer the question of does the government retain any license rights to the IP?
So we are not intending to do that, and that's one of the benefits of using an other transaction. Under other instrument types, we would have no choice but to maintain the ability to take over IP. In this case, we are able to structure this so that the government will not be retained those rights, and that we can ensure that awardees and their partners are the ones that retain IP rights in this particular case. So again, I mean, one of the many pros of using another transaction in this particular instance.
Patrick, one more question for you. Can you clarify how can an independent team submit a proposal if not through a host institution? Does the team need a sam.gov number, and does that require some sort of legal structure?
So it does require, we require the federal government as a whole, when you apply for federal funding, and that is regardless of instrument type, that you are able to provide us with a unique entity identifier, and that is provided through the website sam.gov. It does require either an individual or a legal entity to apply for that. There's there's some tutorials on sam.gov on how to apply, but either an individual, a single person, or a legal entity would need to apply for that prior to the submission of a proposal.
And another question, Patrick, that you might be able to help with: will NSF's OT contract support the legal and administrative staff needed to manage IP, do financial reporting, support building and infrastructure, et cetera, as direct costs?
So this is where I want to be sort of clear on our cost structure here. These are fixed price milestones. We are asking for offers to work with us to provide defined payments. That should be inclusive of all direct and indirect costs. This is not like a typical NSF financial assistance instrument where we have direct and indirect cost rates. We're not negotiating any of that. We are asking for a fixed price per milestone. And that, again, should be inclusive of all those direct and indirect costs. So all your back office functions, all the staff you'll need to support the program itself, computers, telephones, anything you may need should be built into those milestone payments.
And I wonder if, Joda, you can speak a bit about some other forms of support that is not financial for those systems.
So are you sure for Launchpad? Yes, so we are working on developing a technical assistance platform that will be provided to most likely phase 1 teams. And so we're exploring right now, as a result of our Launchpad RFI, what it would look like to provide a network or a platform of support that would wrap around our Tech Labs teams. That might include support like back office services, things like HR and payroll, so that way the research team can really focus 100% on that work. It might include fiscal sponsorship for teams that start off incubated or transitioning from university a university-based organization in phase 0, but then are looking for a more appropriate host organization if that makes more sense in phase 1. And so we are currently looking to stand that up, and we'll have more information on that soon.
And I want to highlight, we don't necessarily expect teams to come in fully formed in this kind of way, but there is that requirement of we need to sign a contract with someone. So there needs to be an LLC or some kind of entity and a SAM.gov number.
So we're going to answer just a couple last questions in the category of program structure, sort of in phases, and then we'll be wrapping up our Q&A section in our webinar. So these questions are about how long is phase 0 for this specific topic? What constitutes a minimum team to get through phase 0? Does the entire team need to be confirmed from the start of phase 0? And does phase 0 include any technical development, or is it solely for preparing to reach phase 1?
So phase 0, you could have some technical milestones. I think we lay that out in the OTASO. You could choose to propose technical milestones, especially if you think that those are milestones that might be need to be demonstrated before you're ready for a phase 1. But there's a list of more programmatic milestones that are required by NSF.
And when do you apply, or how do you apply for phase 1? And can you skip phase 0 if you feel like you're farther ahead?
We don't expect teams to skip phase 0. It's a pretty abbreviated planning phase, I would say, 7 months to get to the 7 months to get to the go, no-go selection period start is not that long. And so we do expect that teams will not skip phase 0.
Great. Well, I think we have hit our time to finalize our webinar.
I think there was a few questions in there I did not answer. I just forgot them.
Here's the last one. What is the exit strategy for X-Labs teams? Is the goal after phase 2 to license this tech, spin out, etc.?
This is a really great question. There's a lot of different ways that we could go. One, a team after phase 2 might have accomplished their goal. They've accomplished their mission, and so much so that they have successfully transitioned to just needing not a tech lab, an X-Lab structure, but a completely different structure. And so they're ready to graduate from the X-Lab program. In some cases, we might see that there is significant need or support for a phase 3. In that case, that phase 3 would have to be really significantly supporting something different than what was supported in phases 1 or 2, and that'll be case by case. And then in other cases, what we don't necessarily want, or the entire goal is not to have, one small business or one startup come out of the X-Lab program. We're really looking to seed an entire technology industry. So does the platform technology that's produced, is it then able to kind of go and be commercialized afterwards? Is it then able to seed an entire field of science or field of technology? And I'll also point out that our Tech Accelerator initiative announced yesterday is pretty ideally positioned to be a potential avenue for teams to move into once they reach those higher TRL levels, technical readiness levels.
Well, thanks so much, Becca and Joda, for staying around longer. And thanks to everyone who attended this webinar on X-Labs today. A recording of this event, including this Q&A session, as well as the slides, will be posted on the NSF website. And we will be hosting a second Q&A focused webinar on Tuesday, June 23rd at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please join us then.
We're also hosting a webinar next week on the quantum topic, but we'll go over a lot of these slides then as well. Thank you very much.